One of the biggest dates in the NFL draft calendar, the combine has been and gone. And so obviously, me and Nick Corbs, co host of the show, are going to go over our combine winners and losers. And also, the end, we're going to go over an interesting segment which I'm going to call testing or tape, where basically me and New are going to go over some players who either we think didn't test so well but will play well, or did test really well and actually won't play well. Basically working out which one we're going to put more stock into. Are we going to put more stock into the testing, or are we going to put more stock into the tape? So make sure you stick around to find out who we've got for that, because we have some very interesting players we're going to discuss for that. And also, before we even get into the winners and losers, make sure you subscribe for more NFL draft content. But New, combine, been and gone. What do you think?
Well, Dom, quickly, just road to a K. Let's get there, almost there. But combine, what I thought was really interesting, actually, this combine. And I think the combine has decreased in value over the years, as tape becomes more important, as analytics become more important. But every year people count out the combine, and every year people rise and fall because of it. So I'm really interested to get into it, Dom.
Absolutely, I completely agree. And also, I want to preface before we get into it just by saying that testing is a part of the puzzle. It's not the overall part of the puzzle. Me and New aren't here to overreact to Bashal Tutin running a 4-3-2 or anything like that. We're not here to count these things twice. We know to avoid that pitfall. But it is already interesting to see who's already on the upward trend and has a really good combine, who's already on a downward trend and doesn't have a really good combine. And whether you like it or not, it is a piece of the puzzle. This time last year, I was on a call with Daniel Jeremiah, not a friend of the pod, but it was this, but maybe one day. And I asked him the question basically of, is the combine rather fit for purpose? Because we have, tracking data already. PFF have game athleticism score. We know that, someone like Omarion Hampton already ran 22 miles an hour in a game. And he said, yes, because we have a data point which everyone has done. Everyone has run in exactly the same way. It's in a controlled environment, and we can compare that data to other players from the same position from different years. So yes, you might not like the combine. It might be the underwear Olympics. But whether you like it or not, it's a massive part of the draft process. And it is a valuable data point. So with that being said, my first winner, I'm going to cheat out the gate here, New. I'm going to say the entire running back class. Basically, I think this is potentially the strongest running back class we've ever seen. It is absolutely loaded with talent, overflowing with talent. There are currently 5 running backs in my top 50, which me and New are going to do in a few weeks' time, maybe even next week, reveal our top 50 big board. There are 5 currently in my top 50, and I am not, as you may know, if you've listened to the pod, if you listen to the channel and me talk, I'm not a huge running back guy. I have previously been of the stance about, positional value and running backs don't matter. I have softened on that stance. But even so, to have 5 running backs in my top 50 isn't because it's a weaker class, it's because these running backs are so damn good. 9 running backs ran faster than a 4.5, including Travion Henderson, my RB3, absolute Pookie, as I call him, absolutely love him. He ran a 4.43. Quinshon Junkins, his teammate from Ohio State, ran a 4.48. Omarion Hampton ran a 4.46, and he came in at 221 pounds, which is a big weight and a really fast time. And 3 running backs ran faster than a 4.4. Brashard Smith from SMU ran a 4.39. Jaden Blue ran a 4.38. I absolutely love Jaden Blue. I tweeted it out earlier in the week. I was watching Matthew Golden film, and I'll talk about him later, as I'm sure you will. And I found myself loving Jaden Blue from not even watching his tape. He is a big sleeper. I think you see the speed and athleticism on his tape already. He didn't test fully, so I don't think the hype has got to where it would have been if he did, but watch out for Jaden Blue. And finally, Bashal Tutin, the running back from Virginia Tech, ran a 4.32. And again, you see that speed on tape already. We're not here to count it twice, but nevertheless, having a running back in the modern NFL that can run in the low 4.3s, that's going to help your draft stock.
I completely agree, Dom. It's called the fastest job interview in the world for a reason. And these running backs absolutely smashed it. Brashard Smith, like you said, a bit of a sleeper, ex-wide receiver, moving over to running back, running that speed. He's fun to watch. And I think the question of the day is, I'm not a betting man, Dom. We would never encourage betting on this channel unless DraftKings wants to give us a chunk of change.
Yeah.
If you want to bet
Signed a ting.
if you want to bet 2.5 over running backs drafts in the first round, this could be the year to do it. And I could see many teams at the bottom of the first. You know, the Chargers, we mocked Omar and Hampton to in our last mock, which the comments are pretty Chargers fans seem to be happy with.
People liked it.
You know, towards that bottom of the first, there are so many people who need running backs, so many teams that need running backs. And the question is, are teams going to wait because there's value later? Or do these guys think that these are franchise-changing, game-changing players? And it's obviously hard to tell. I'm in the opinion that if you think a player is good, you should draft him, not wait for a lower player with a similar skill set. I think you should get the player that you want and get the player that you need. But it'll be interesting to see come April 25th.
Yeah, because that's the thing, is it might not even be a lower skill set. Like, this class is so good, it's so deep, that you could pass on let's say, Amarian Hampton and still get a Caleb Johnson, for example. But I've kind of dipped my toes in here a bit with the big board, just to give it a bit of a preview. I've got currently Amarian Hampton as 32. So I've kind of dipped and then I've got Travian Henderson at like 34. So like, I'm not, if over 2.5, I think is high. But this is the year where it's going to happen. A really strong running back class paired with a not so strong rest of the draft class, or at least things like quarterbacks, wide receivers. I think the wide receiver sweet spot will be later in the draft at around the top of the second. But talking about wide receivers, there's also going to be some winners for the wide receivers for me. Notably, if I could group them together, the top 40 wide receivers, players that I think are going to be drafted now in the top 40 picks. That is Alec Ayamano from Stanford. Again, if you've been listening to the show, you'll know that I've always been...
Travis Hunter's dad, Travis Hunter's father.
Travis Hunter's pappy, exactly. As you well know, I've been really high on Ayamano since we did our summer scouting, all the way back when. Jaden Higgins from Iowa State, who I have now watched and I adore.
Both the Iowa State guys.
Both the Iowa State guys. And I'm actually going to leave the third name for that later segment. So I'll quickly talk about Ayamano. I've raced him, like I said before. He ran a 4.47 at 6'1", 207 pounds. He has an elite explosion grade per RAS, which is at MathBomb on Twitter. If you don't go follow him already, it's amazing the stuff that he does. He basically gives the athletes a score from 1 to 10 on how athletic they are. And Ayamano has a 9.56, so he is a damn good athlete, which we already know. This guy ran like a 10.42 in high school, 100-meter dash, so we already know this, but it's great to have that confirmed. And then Jaden Higgins, real my guy. I actually watched his tape after the draft, and I can't believe I didn't watch it sooner, to be honest. He, for me, not off the combine alone, don't get me wrong, but for me, he's a first round wide receiver. I think he will be in the first round for me. He's 6'4", 214 pounds, moves incredibly well for his size, like so well. I even went back and watched all of his Senior Bowl one-on-ones, and he was just sourcing people up on the line. You see it on his tape as well. One of Travis Hunter's best reps is when he does like a one-step slant, crosses the DB's face, and gets a touchdown in the end zone. And Travis Hunter's like 6'1", 190 pounds odd?
188 he weighed in at the combine.
188. Jaden Higgins had the exact same rep at 6'4", 214. And he, for me, is a potential wide receiver one, which is what I look for when I'm drafting a receiver in the first round. That's kind of how I approach wide receiver, is if you're going to be a one or a potential one, I'll take you in the first. If you can be like a high-end two, I'm going to take you in the second. So there might be sometimes like players who I have lower on my board who I really like, but I think if you're drafting a receiver in the first, they have to give you that wide receiver one ability, or at least 1A, 1B. And I think Higgins can be that guy. And he's kind of projected at the moment as like a power slot, but I would try this guy at X, like T. Higgins-esque. I'm not saying he is T. Higgins or is going to be T. Higgins, but that big-bodied outside wide receiver who can just be really reliable for you. I absolutely love Jaden Higgins. Big riser for me.
I'm a big fan of Jaden Higgins as well. And similar to my guy is Torrey Horton from Colorado State.
Oh, good shout
who
out.
we mentioned in the top 5 receivers. I had him at number 5, which was probably a bit rich. Hadn't really dug into the receiver film. Obviously, now the more common names are coming out. But he had a really good combine. And he's very similar to that Jaden Higgins mold. Slightly lighter, but also has that big frame. Balled out at Colorado State, balled out the combine. And he's someone who... he doesn't really have that number one out and out. He's not going to be a first round pick, but if you miss on Higgins, he could be a really good consolation prize in the end of the second, top of the third.
That's interesting. Is it? So he's one of your winners then?
Yeah, he's one of my winners, and I think, Dom, we've got to talk about probably the biggest winner of the combine. I'll be interested to hear your take. Is Matthew Golden, the wide receiver out of Texas? No, running a 4.29 is absolutely ridiculous. You hear all these RAS scores and players running ridiculous times. 4.29 should not be forgotten about. There's obviously 41 last year with Xavier Worthy, but 49 is absolutely blazing speed. People are even putting him in the categories of Tessa McMillan, which I don't quite agree with. If you want, there's a great video on the channel from last week about a Tessa McMillan player profile. I recommend you go watch. Good video. But he will be a locked-on first-round pick now. You saw it with Xavier Worthy, pushed him into the first round, running a 49 at that size with that production. I do not see him falling out the top 20.
See, I'm going to talk about Golden in the testing versus tape, actually, because I agree, right? Objectively speaking, if you run a 4.29, you're going to turn some heads and you're going to raise your stock, whether you like it or not. I think the Xavier Worthy comp is fair with the speed, right? Speed plays in the NFL, and if you can run a 4.29, that's going to work to some degree. What I reject, though, is the idea that Worthy got drafted because he ran a quick 40 or anything like that. Like, he had 3 years of production. He did 1,000 yards at Texas as a junior, as a true junior. Like, he was really, in his first year, he was really good. He had 3 years of production. Matthew Golden does not have 3 years of production. He has 1 year of production. So for me, I'm going to talk about Golden later. Spoiler alert for the testing versus tape. But obviously, you think he's a winner.
I do think he's a winner, but I'm just going to quickly transition onto one of the losers in the wide receiver group, which I think is so unfair, but he made himself a loser, is Isaiah Bond, the wide receiver out of Texas.
We'll quickly talk about Bond.
Yeah, so running a 4.41 is a great time. That's quicker than Saquon Barkley, Julio Jones. These absolutely elite players. But coming out on a press conference and saying, I know I'm going to run a 4.19, which is by far the fastest ever time, by obviously 0.02, but obviously exponentially more difficult the faster you get. And then running a 4.4, it may as well have run a 6-second flat. He completely killed his own good result by saying he was going to do so much better.
Yeah.
Whoever his agent is should have just told him to shut his mouth and get on with it, because he ruined a great performance by overhyping himself for no reason.
Yeah, I've also got Bond as a loser, and we'll quickly talk about him before getting back to some winners, and then we'll properly move on to our losers. But yeah, I think it's right to raise it here when we're talking about the wide receivers. You cannot overpromise and underdeliver like that when it's being literally televised.
It's so bad.
People have the receipts, and you'd best believe that they are going to bring them up. And his own ex-teammate, Worthy, did bring it up on Twitter as well. He said, there's fast and then there's me. Like, Bond is selling himself as a speedster. And for me, is a loser as well, not just because he didn't run as quick as he said he would, right? 4.4, like you say, is still a good time. But he has been selling himself as a speedster, and he had a bit of a down year in terms of what we're expecting of him this year, right, in 2024. And really, if you did a way too early mock draft after last year's draft, Bond probably would have been a kind of a late 20s potential first-round pick. He's nowhere near that now. Like, I'd take Gunnar Helm, I think, before I took Isaiah Bond. Like, I think Helm was the better receiver in that offense when he was healthy. So I don't love Bond's tape. I don't love Bond's testing. So for me, I also knew you're right. Bond is a big loser. But going back to our winners, I've got 2 more that I want to talk about. Is there anyone that you want to mention before I do?
What, just in the receiver group or overall winners throughout the...
No, so I've got 3 more winners.
Okay, 3 more winners. Okay, I'll talk about what in receiver groups. I'm not, or just overall.
Anyone.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about the quarterback position. Someone that is drawing a lot of controversy, even in this pod, is Jackson Dart. Has to be a big winner from this combine.
Okay, interesting.
To be fair, he was throwing against scrubs. I think that is an important thing to mention.
He's throwing on air.
Yeah, but he looked by far the best. And I think that's completely true. He's now the quarterback 3 nailed on. He'll be the 3rd quarterback taken. People like Will Howard or Jalen Merrill didn't have the performance that they wanted to. I'm not going to say they had a big loser, because I don't think it really affected their stock too much. But Jackson Dart looked the best on air compared to all these other guys, is now the QB3. All quarterbacks are always needy market. Will this push him into the first round? Still remains to be seen, but he's definitely a top 50 player now.
Interesting. It's the combine for quarterbacks, obviously, so like it is difficult to move your stock either way. But I have a loser for a quarterback, and so I also think it's fair that then we have a winner for a quarterback, right? Because it can't only work one way. And I think you're right. Like, that QB3, maybe even earlier, is kind of up for debate now off the back of the combine. And, there was Tyler Shirk being kind of thrown around, and Will Howard didn't throw that well. Again, it's kind of on air with the receivers you don't have a good chemistry with, so I don't think either of us are going to hold that against him particularly. But yeah, when that QB3 is wide open, and even something as small as a decent combine, when it is so tightly packed together for that tenuous QB3 spot, then doing whatever you can to raise your stock is super important. For me though, Noon, you said that you thought the biggest winner of the combine was Matthew Golden.
Yeah.
I think my next two players are actually bigger winners than Golden. First of all is Nick Emanwari,
I love
the
him, Dom.
safety from North Carolina. Go on, talk to me about it.
South Carolina, just to
South Carolina. Yeah, not UNC.
Yeah, so Dom, he had the best. You talked about RAS relative to the athletic score. He had a 10.
Yeah.
He is the best ever safety to do the combine. I'm going to quickly pull up his stats here. He ran a 4.38 on the 40, Dom, which is insane. That's quicker than the speedster Isaiah Bond. And I think this combine, like you said, I think he is a massive winner, has pushed him into safety one conversations. As a player, his best strength and worst, I think it's a two-faced coin, is his aggression. You see that physicality and that speed up on film, and he always wants to jump routes, hit players, which obviously does lead to bad angles sometimes and, missed coverage. But I love him, Dom. He's so exciting to watch, and he's come up from almost nowhere to really be in this first-time conversation.
Yeah, so Emanwari was on the radar because he was going in mock drafts ahead of Malachi Starks from the likes of Daniel Jeremiah, who does his mock drafts based on what he's hearing. And you're right, he got a 10 out of 10 relative athletic score. He is the most athletic safety since 1987. And to put it into context more, so he came in at 6'3" and 1/8", 97th percentile, 220 pounds, 92nd percentile, 43-inch vert, 98th percentile, 11'6" broad jump, 98th percentile. And then I had him, because it was the unofficial time, I had him at a 4.40, which was 94th percentile. So if he ran a 4.38, then that would be even higher than that. So the way that I would sum up Emanwari is he's got Cam Chancellor's build with Derwin James's athleticism. And it is an all-time combine performance, not just safety, but any player in the history of the combine. And I would say, it's important for a safety to have those numbers because it means that he can hold up in pass coverage, which you can see on his tape. He can hold up in run defense. Again, you can see it on his tape with that build. He can play in the box. He can play on the line of scrimmage. He can play that free safety role. He can tick every box. And what that means is it makes him really versatile in how you want to use him. And so, for example, if you're the Vikings, say, and you need your safeties to kind of be able to play different roles. Can they be a blitzer? Can they stuff the run? Can they cover? I think on certain boards, Emanwari will be the first safety on it ahead of Malachi Starks because they kind of offer very different things. Starks, I don't think Emanwari can cover a guy in the slot man-to-man. He can hold up in zone, but Malachi Starks is the guy that if you want someone to cover as a slot defender, Starks is your guy. If you want someone with insane game IQ that can trigger downhill and sniff out fake, trick plays, Starks is your guy. If you, though, want your safety to be able to play in the box, play on the line of scrimmage, be a blitzer, stuff the run, then Emanwari is your guy. So I think you're right. For some teams now, there will be a different safety one who we would have assumed maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks ago because Starks might be dethroned. Now, I would still have Starks over Emanwari, but I think he could definitely sneak into the back end of the first round 100%, even if he is a safety.
Well, Don, what I would say is the versatility of center fielder blitzer is much more likely than corner. You see that it's much more of an easier transition, much more fluid, much more versatile in play-to-play action, which that's why I'm still Malachi Starks above. I think he's a smarter player. I think he's a better football player. But Emanwari's raw athleticism and power is something that you can't teach. And it is such an important skill. I think he's a great player. And I we're doing our big boards, soon to come. He's definitely in my top 50, probably my top 30 now.
Yeah, he'll definitely be inside my top 50, 40. What I would say, and this, I've just thought about this on the spot, is that it's quite good comparison is Richardson versus Stroud, right? Obviously they play different positions, and I just think it's quite an interesting comparison again about do you want the athletic freak? And we've seen Richardson have massive success with that athleticism. But then also, if you want the cerebral kind of game manager, that's it, and it's kind of the equivalent for safeties, really. I think it's quite interesting to see which kind of attributes will team lean towards more? Do you want ball skills, game IQ, coverage, or do you want versatility, run defense, athleticism?
Yeah.
That is really the question. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see who goes where. And then, I think my 1B winner,
Okay.
another 10 RAS score, Shamar Stewart, the edge defender from A&M. He had what can only be described as a Trayvon Walker-esque combine, I think. We saw, again, Trayvon Walker, a player that had not great production at Georgia, have a fantastic combine and rise up the board so much so that he dethroned Aiden Hutchinson to be the first overall pick, which absolutely bonkers. But anyway, that is the case. Now, there are questions about production. Again, like Walker. So Stewart has only had career high of 2 sacks per season.
1.5, depending who you ask.
1.5, depending on who you ask. I think the half sack thing is bloody ridiculous.
JJ Watt school of sacks.
It's mental because 2 people sack the quarterback and they want the quarterback to have 1 sack, that they split that one between the people that sacked him. Like, give me a break. It's so unfortunately, I don't want to alienate any of our audience, but that is very American.
It is very American.
Sorry, guys. Look, there's British things that people don't do well. There's things that British people don't do well. Americans, you guys count weirdly. So, Shamar Stewart, what was really useful about that news, that also at the Combine, the players have their podiums and they talk and they ask questions about the media. Nick Scouton, Shamar Stewart's teammate at A&M, he was like, it's annoying I don't have it to hand. He came in like 30 pounds lighter than what he was listed at A&M. And in the questions, it became clear that the way that the Texas defensive scheme needed their defensive line to play was that they had to play the run before they could rush the passer. And obviously, when a quarterback's holding onto the ball for, on average, like 2.7 seconds, if you're spending a half second having to lock out the offensive line and peer into the backfield to see if the running back's handing the ball off, you lose that ability to be able to sack the quarterback. And Walker has decent pressure numbers, 39 pressures, but only 2 sacks. And to me, what that suggests is, when you're playing half a second behind, you're not going to be able to convert those pressures into sacks. And so I'm not that worried about Shamar Stewart's lack of production. I think that if you look at his tape, you see the ability to win with power, win with that length. I think at the Senior Bowl, you saw him introduce some other moves as well. So for me, I'm not concerned about the lack of production. I think the Combine is actually really good for kind of answering those questions there. If you get Shamar Stewart to pin his ears back, I think he can be a fantastic NFL edge rusher. And really, I think now off the back of his performance, I think 8 to the Panthers is in play.
I'm going to set my stall out. I do not like Shamar Stewart anywhere near the top 10.
Really?
He's an athletic run defender with some pass rush upside. And that is not worth a top 10 pick. He's got 1.5 sacks. I'm going to say 1.5. Over 3 years, never had more than 2. Never had over 1.5 sacks. He's playing on a great defensive line with, like you said, Nick Scouton, who might be a first-round pick, if not a top 50 pick on the other edge. Everyone in the NFL has to play the run first. It's how it works. You play the run, then play the good. That's how all linebackers do. That's what basically
that's a different position.
But defensive fronts are obviously first reading pass, then reading for the bend.
They're not.
Yes, they are.
That's the point. Is that someone like Abdul Carter can pin his ears back and rush the passer. Like the Texas A&M defensive scheme was founded upon the defensive line being able to stuff the run, because that meant on the backside with the secondary they can do some funky coverage stuff. That's like a defensive philosophy. It's not this. I think what you're arguing, which I agree with, is that as an edge rusher you also have to be able to play the run. So you're thinking about both, right? Like you are going to rush the passer at one moment and then have to switch to being a run defender the next. But literally, as a foundational standpoint, like what the defensive coordinator needed his defensive line to do was to make sure that there was no run and then rush the passer. Someone like Abdul Carter will have reps on his tape where his only goal is to get to the quarterback. Forget about the running back. It's the same in the NFL. Like, if it's an obvious passing down, you're just going to go and pin your ears back. And I think if Shamar Stewart was given those opportunities, he would have much better production. I think, with the fall, apparently from the Combine, nobody's taking James Pierce Jr. in the first round. That's a rumor, might not be true.
It's impossible to substantiate because of
impossible to substantiate. We're not in the room.
Yeah,
I'm not saying it's fact. It is quite literally a rumor. But with James Pierce Jr. potentially sliding, with someone like Mike Green also potentially sliding, who are you going to take after Abdul Carter if you do need an edge rusher? I personally really wouldn't hate the idea of Shamar Stewart going at 8 to the Panthers.
Yeah, because I think with Shamar Stewart, I understand what you're saying, Dom, and I think it's fair. But with Shamar Stewart, it's so easy. When I was evaluating him, I was doing play-by-play. I was like, oh, this guy's, I'm quite getting into it. But you've got to think about the big picture sometimes. I think as draft analysts, as fans, whatever, you always want to find that one detail, that one piece of insight that separates you from everyone else. But I think sometimes you just got to think big picture. He doesn't make his tackles. I think he's a bad tackler. And he doesn't finish plays. And he doesn't produce on the field. All of those three things do not scream top 10 pick to me. Mike Green's single spin move, I think, is more impressive than Shamar Stewart's season of tape. The fact that Mike Green might be taken below Shamar Stewart to me is absolute heresy. And I'm a big production guy, and I just don't understand. Even if you do play the run first, you are literally the most athletic D end almost ever. You should be able to beat these tackles who are going to be future Uber drivers. I do not think it's ridiculous to say that he underperformed consistently, even when paired with a great edge. And sure, you've seen Rashawn Gary, you've seen Trayvon Walker, you've seen these players sort of turn it around, but never to the extent that they're the best edge rushers in the league. Production translates, and Shamar Stewart simply doesn't have much of it.
Isn't A&M in the SEC?
Yeah, A&M's in the SEC.
Yeah, so he's not going against huge Uber drivers. He isn't Mike Green.
There's
the
16 teams in the SEC. The Vanderbilt tackles aren't getting drafted. He didn't have production against them. His non-conference opponents aren't getting drafted. He's not getting sacks against them either.
Well, look, we're going to continue this debate when we have our top 50 big board reveal, because I think we'll talk about the players that we have a massive difference on, and I'm sure Stewart will be one of them. Let's then move on to the losers before we get on to the tape versus testing. I have to start this with Harold Fannin Jr., the tight end from Bowling Green. He had 117 receptions this year, 1,555 receiving yards, 10 touchdowns. We've spoken about him on the tight end episode. You can go and check that out again. But he had to block the sledge, right? So obviously, tight ends have to block a dummy on a big metal weight, push it back. Darnell Washington, Georgia tight end, infamously took that thing for a walk, right? Again, rose his draft stock. Harold Fannin Jr. blocked it for about 5 yards before a unsentient sled managed to spin him around. He ended up facing 180 degrees back from where he started, which, if it was a player that was actually trying to do that, would have done it much sooner than a literal, unconscious, not human sled. It was a disaster. It was really embarrassing. Not a good look. In the gauntlet drill, this guy was veering all over the place. He was drifting away from the ball. He was slowing down to catch it. That is not what you want from a receiving tight end. He did run a decent 40 time, 4.73. Can't hate that. But he's 6'3", 240 pounds. There are going to be high school recruits that are going to come into the college season this year weighing 240 pounds at 6'3". He offers nothing as an inline tight end in terms of his blocking ability. We raised that in the tight end episode already. But to have it so clearly revealed to us at the combine, where you're kind of only meant to shine, or not meant to get exposed by the bloody sled in the blocking drills. So he showed he wasn't a natural blocker, which we already knew. But then he showed that he's also not particularly quick for his weight, and he's not a great natural pass catcher either. So for me, I was already not that high on Fannin, and I already think that Elijah Arroyo is going to be ahead of him in my final big board. But not a good day at the office for Fannin.
Not at all, Dom. When we first did our first tight end rankings, I was even thinking Howard Fannin maybe it for the Chiefs as a Travis Kelce replacement, as a move tight end, as a hybrid tight end. Now he's basically a third round pick. You can't be that small, that light, that bad at blocking, being a move tight end, sort of an Evan Ingram style, tight end is what he would have envisaged. Evan Ingram ran a 4.4.
Yeah, good comp.
He ran a 4.7. And, people might think that's only 0.3 seconds. That is night and day at the pro level. And I think as a whole, the tight ends didn't have a great day at the combine. When you're looking there at their drills, they were falling over on routes against air quite commonly. It looked like a Britball thing out there. Genuinely, I was really quite shocked. I was a bit disappointed because I was really high on this tight end class on film, and then seeing them, I was really quite disappointed. But Howard Fannin for sure is really, really dropping down boards, and maybe even to day 3, which would be such a shame for him.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was just an all-round not great performance from the tight ends. You mentioned a quarterback as one of your winners. I mentioned I have a quarterback as one of my losers, and that's going to be Jalen Milroe.
Yeah.
Now, he was a winner in the sense that his hand somehow grew by half an inch from the Senior Bowl measurements, which someone's made some bad mistakes there. I'm going to trust the Combine over the Senior Bowl, but either way, odd that would happen. And he wasn't great on air. I'm not going to hold that against him. I think for the fades that he was throwing, a lot of his receivers were having to slow down. But look, different chemistry. I'm not going to hold that against him. However, I think his decision to not run was bonkers. I don't know who his agent is. He needs to get rid of them because it is a job interview. You are taking your biggest strength, your biggest asset off the table. He is not Lamar Jackson. Nobody's interested in Jalen Milroe as a running back or a wide receiver before they are as a quarterback, right? Like that's simply not happening. It's because, he wants to show he can play quarterback. Great. Like what we've seen Justin Fields have a really high floor, less high of a ceiling, but we've seen him have a really high floor because he's an insane rushing threat. He's being spoken about in this year's free agent quarterback class because of that. He's not a very good passer of the football, unfortunately, but he can run like the damn wind, and that plays to a certain degree even in the NFL. So for Milroe to not run, crazy. I think he would have run in the 4.4s, and I think that would have made him a second rounder. I'm not even joking. I think he would have locked himself in as the QB3 if he'd run the 40. Now, do I agree with that sentiment? Of course not. We already know that Jalen Milroe is fast. I saw someone tweet saying that if you need Milroe to run the 40 to know he's fast, you need a new sport. It's just the wrong way of looking at it. We know he's fast. We just don't know exactly how fast. And again, going back to what Daniel Jeremiah said, we don't know how fast he is compared to other quarterbacks. I think it was a crazy decision for an already flawed prospect to not play to his biggest strength.
I agree. I don't know why he didn't do it. Anthony Richardson, I'm not saying he went number 4 overall because of his combine, but it definitely was a slight factor at the minimum. Seeing this guy as an athletic freak, I think to try and get inside the head of Milroe, try to get inside of his agent, I think he's going to run at his pro day and test out at his pro day, where they can always just skew the numbers. You hear people about 3 nines at their pro day, but the idea is that
take the combine with a pinch of salt.
But people who are interested in him are still going to see him on at the pro day, maybe? I don't know. I'm trying to be a defender here, but I agree. Like you said, the QB3 was open for grabs. Kyle McCord, Will Howard, Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe, even Shuck was all put through the hat in the ring. And for him to not even give it really a go was bizarre for me. And I think Tyler Shuck was the only quarterback in his group that ran the 40, and he's 25 years old.
Yeah, and he ran like a 4.7. Everyone was like, hey, that'll do.
I genuinely think he raised his draft stock just by running.
So do I.
Ridiculous. If Jalen ran even a 4.5, he would be like a second round pick. And he decided not to run because he's not a receiver. Yeah, we know that.
No one's going to draft you as a quarterback, mate, let alone a wide receiver where there's a million you can find anyway.
I think it's bizarre.
Crazy decision. Right. So
I'll do another loser quickly. It's such a shame because I do like this guy. It's Tez Johnson, the wide receiver.
No, okay, this is quite good because I have him as a tape versus testing. So you talk about him and then we'll roll into that.
So he ran a 4.51 at I think 155 pounds. Was it, Dom?
154.
154 pounds. And I know he had a good 3 cone and sure, whatever. But that is borderline undraftable. That is too light to be anywhere. I know this is not super important in evaluating receivers, but he can't be there on an obvious run play from the slot because he's going to be a complete non-factor. He basically can't run deep because he has to be about 5 yards open to be open. He can't really do anything apart from techie short routes, which he may as well just sign some veteran 30-year-old to do instead of wasting a 3rd-round pick on. I like him. I think he's a good story and he had good tape. But that is an undraftable measurables. To run that slowly at that weight and that size, he's off my board completely.
No, he's not.
I'd rather have Xavier Restrepo, who's got much more
bonkers.
production. I think he's a much better player and much better measurables than he would.
I want what you're smoking. Right. So that leads us quite nicely then into our tape versus testing.
Yeah.
Which one we're going to put more stock into. Obviously, now you're not saying that it's the testing, it's the measurables. Like you're saying that he's undraftable because he's just so light, which, to be fair to you, Nu, 154 pounds is literally 0th percentile. There is nobody that is that weight or lighter that has been drafted, that has played in the NFL.
And also running a 4.5 is not fast enough at that weight.
Right, so let's talk about it. So for me, Tez Johnson is someone that I'm going to take the tape over the testing. So yes, he ran a 4.51 at below 5'10" at 154 pounds. Objectively, not a great time. Yeah, but the play speed on tape is there, and the agility grade, the composite agility grade from the relative athletic score, is elite. He ran a 6.65 3 cone, a 4.15 shuttle. That's how he wins. And for me, the game, as you well know, is not played in a straight line without pads on. You're not running the 40 when you play the NFL, when you play college, when you play football. This is a guy that has produced in the Big Ten on one of the biggest teams in the country for the last 2 years at Oregon. And he's made plays for them consistently now for 2 years. He's not played in the Sun Belt. He's not in the FCS. He's been in the Big Ten playing for Oregon and has been, I would argue, better than the big receiver they brought in, whose name is unfortunately escaping me now, but he wears number 7, I think, for Oregon. Like, Tez Johnson outperformed him, and he was meant to be their wide receiver 1. Like, he had 50 first downs this year. He's a playmaker. He had 586 yards after the catch, which is 4th in college football. Like, that plays. Like, you don't get that by running 5-yard outs and by breaking tackles from future Uber drivers. Like, he's playing in the Big Ten against guys that will play in the NFL. And for me, the tape just shows someone that, yeah, he isn't going to be able to do a lot of things that you need a lot of other wide receivers to do, but he wins with his agility. I'm going to trust the tape over his testing. Yes, he ran a 4. I would have liked him to at least run in the 4.4s, but then also knew, and the reason why he's such an interesting evaluation is that he clocked in as the fastest wide receiver during the on-field drills in terms of miles per hour tracking. So, yeah, he didn't run fast at the 40. I mean, you're in a sprint, you don't have pads on. I'm not trying to, suddenly discredit everything I've said about other players running fast 40s. Like, I wanted Johnson to do better than that, 100%. But I've watched the tape. I've seen this guy win, and the way that he wins will work in the NFL. Someone just needs to draft him. And you know what? The final thing I'll say before you chip in, Micah Parsons. I usually hate NFL players' takes on other NFL players, right? These guys don't sit down and grind film. They come out with sound bites. They back their guys. They back their alma mater. They say something which doesn't really matter. However, Micah Parsons is a genuine ball knower. Like, he's had some great takes on the Deebo Samuel trade, talking about the actual contract here. He has his own podcast. Like, I actually trust this guy when he says things. He came out and defended Tez Johnson. He said that he runs a 4.3 on tape, that he's a guy that can play in the NFL. And I agree with what Micah Parsons is saying there.
No, his tape is good. I guess this is the whole debate here. But my issue is, if I'm an NFL coordinator, I don't know where I'm going to use him. He's not even an every down.
Tank Dell.
Tank Dell is bigger and faster. And I think that's important to recognize. For our European listeners, he's 65 kilos. He's a 15-year-old boy playing slot receiver effectively. When you think about 65 kilos, Dom, I'm 80 and I'm basically get carried away by a strong gust of wind.
Are you 80?
Yeah, I'm pretty fat these days. I can't lie.
Oh, God, mate. Final year of uni's hitting you hard.
Yeah, God, the fresh 15s hit me like a truck.
Okay, no, I've got Paddy to fact check you on that.
Okay.
154 pounds is 70 kilograms.
Oh, okay, so maybe he's 16. Okay, fine. Maybe he's got his GCSE results if he's lucky. But I'm saying he can't be an obvious passing downs. He's not a deep threat or even a medium route threat. He can only win on whips, curls, slants, which you can just get anyone off the street to do that. Any of these practice squad guys will be as good as him, and I think it's a waste of a high draft pick because there's no wide receiver 1 upside, there's no deep threat upside, there's no game-changing upside at all. I like him, I think he's a great story, and I really hope that I'm wrong and he does succeed in the NFL, but I just do not see that 0th percentile size, that 0th percentile weight translating into a league full of the biggest men in the world, effectively.
No, I'm a Tez Johnson believer. And we're going to fight about it again when we do our big board, because I'm going to back the boy. But anyway, final player before we talk about Matthew Golden, then we're going to wrap it up. Will Campbell, the offensive tackle from LSU, had a very interesting day at the office. He had really good numbers, barring one. He had a really good explosion grade, elite per RAS, really good speed grade, elite, ran a 4, I think it was a 4.49 in the 40, ran sub 5 basically. However, he has sub 33-inch arms, which is not ideal. Now, there are definitely tackles out there that have done well with 32-inch or more arms, but it is undeniably a simply mathematical physics problem, right? If you have an edge rusher that has long arms and can get into your chest and you can't, with your shorter arms, get into his chest, you're going to struggle. We saw Joe Tooney struggle against Jalix Hunt. You know, Joe Tooney is one of the best guards in the NFL. He struggled at tackle in the Super Bowl against Jalix Hunt, who was a, 4th-round rookie who just had longer arms than him. And he bullied him as a result. And so it does matter. How much it matters is up for NFL teams to decide. Personally, I would still draft Will Campbell to play tackle because I think he's shown you that. I don't think he hasn't shown you that he can hold up there, if that makes sense. He's not shown you he can't play tackle yet. At the moment, this is all hypothetical. And if you have to move him inside, you're going to get an elite guard, frankly, is how I see Campbell. I see him as a great offensive tackle who I would draft to play tackle. And if you have to kick him inside because he is struggling, fantastic, you've still got an elite guard. So I would still draft Will Campbell really highly. I know it's unfortunate that he has sub 33-inch arms. I mean, that's the thing is that if he had, 3/4 of an inch more on his arms, would he suddenly be a top 10 pick as opposed to not? Like, it seems a bit ridiculous when you put it that way, but it is a threshold for NFL teams. So I would give him a shot at tackle, but what do you think?
Tom, I don't really actually think it matters that much. I think what you're saying is true, but I think even if he is a guard, he's still worth a top 10 pick. And I think there was
I agree with that. I think,
there's a sort of that myth. If you ever watch The Blind Side, the opening scene in The Blind Side is, Lawrence Taylor breaking Joe Theismann's leg and explaining why the left tackle is the second most important position in football. Yeah. It's a myth. It's a bit of a lie. Offensive line is graded as a unit. Offensive guard to offensive tackle, the value in it is not that drastic. And if I'm the Bears, I need both. And also, I thought Martin Membu had a great combine as well. Martin
Membu,
Yeah. These guys might be available in the second round. You can still take them. I think if I'm in the top 10, even if he's a guard, he's still worth a top 10 pick. So for me, it's a bit of a non-factor, but obviously I'm not an NFL GM. But I think it doesn't matter that much.
I mean, that whole blindside thing, the blindside is whatever side you're not looking to. Like, I know it's about like right-handed, left-handed quarterbacks. Like, if you're right-handed, you're not going to be looking to your left as much because of how you got to stand. But if I'm right-handed and I'm throwing a play to my left, my right is my blind side. Like, it's such a stupid point. And I agree with you. Offensive line is about who is the worst along your line. And Campbell will allow you to get your best 5 out there. And also, I do need to shout out Amar Membu. I think he's going to go, and I think he could be in play for the Patriots at 4. Yeah.
I like that take. I don't agree with it, but I think that's a good hot take.
I think he's in play with the Patriots. He's had a fantastic rise. Really good. But let's wrap it up by talking about Matthew Golden. I wanted to leave to the end because I think this is a really juicy one. You had him as a winner because he ran a 4.29.
Yeah.
I watched Golden's tape before the combine, actually. And because I've heard people saying that he's a Stephon Diggs, that, he's got these amazing ball skills and he can pluck one-handers, and then suddenly runs a sub 4.3 and, he's going to be fantastic and he's going to be his wide receiver 1. I really did not see that on Golden's tape at all, which is why for me he's a tape versus testing guy, and I'm going to go with the tape over the testing because at no point did I see Golden running a 4.3 on his tape at all. Like, I thought he actually looked like quite an adequate athlete. Like, he had nice agility, he can run good routes, he's a good deep threat, he's got good ball tracking. But at no point was I like, this guy's a burner. He's going to make a cornerback wrong when he's right, and he can be a wide receiver 1. I don't like his physicality. He's 5'11", 191 pounds, and he plays lighter than that. I think he struggles to avoid contact, and when he does get into it, I think he struggles to disengage from it effectively in his routes. And he did no other testing apart from the 40. So we don't have the agility. We don't have other things like that. And so for me, Golden is someone that I know, right, is a winner in the sense that, yeah, he's going to now be drafted in the first round. I'm seeing takes on social media of having Golden over McMillan.
Yeah, I've seen that as well.
Is mind-blowing to me. I can't believe that. Like, Golden to me was like a good wide receiver 2, like a Z receiver. It'd be a good complement to a proper wide receiver 1. Maybe like a Chris Godwin kind of type. Like, I'm not saying they play the game the same way, but that kind of mold of receiver that, like, yeah, nice 2. Like, nothing that's going to, blow your mind. I'm now seeing Golden spoken about as the best wide receiver in this class, and I think it's quite a sneaky, decent wide receiver class. I don't think I'd draft Golden in the first round. I would take Higgins over Golden. Is my take.
I don't think I'd really say that, but what I think is a bit of a soft influence on this is Travis Hunter weighing in at 188 pounds and now definitely being a corner. Sort of has allowed this bit of a power vacuum in this wide receiver 2 class.
Yes,
of people trying to fill it, with Goldens, with Higgins, I thought Luther Burden had quite a good combine. Now there's a bit of a gold rush to that wide receiver 2, and I think people online are just trying to get that nugget before they get locked in. They're trying to be like Matthew Golden, wide receiver 2, so that when they do go 10, they can be vindicated. I agree, Dom. I think I'm a bit more caveman as the new man, run fast, man good is sort of my current
the John Ross special.
Yeah, exactly. But I still think he's worth a first round pick. I think Higgins, I think he's a good player, but I think there's a big same tier of these receivers who people are going to try to push up to fill that wide receiver 2 void, and it doesn't necessarily have to happen. I think in mid-round pick to the Bengals, I wouldn't be opposed to him going as a wide receiver 2. If T. Higgins, I think T. Higgins is probably going to stay, but as a good wide receiver 2, I think he could be there. But I don't know. I'm sort of on the fence here, Dom. So I'm going to side with you. I'm going to go Tape over.
Tape over testing. See, I completely agree. I think the sweet spot for this year's receiver class is going to be the top end of the second, which it kind of has been historically. Like, I think the only receiver that I would take in, like, really confidently with like a top 20 pick is McMillan, and Hunter if you wanted to play him at wide receiver, but I would play him at corner. Yeah. And actually, no, I would take Burden with a top 20 pick as well. But you're right. There's a bit of a vacuum being created now by the lack of a proper wide receiver too. And there's a big bunch of them. Golden, Imano, Higgins, Trey Harris, maybe from Ole Miss at the top of the second. So, but no, all will be revealed where we have these guys when we do our top 50 big board reveal, which, if not next week, will be the week after. We've got to make sure we grind enough tape to get that to you. But if you want to make sure you can see that as soon as it drops, make sure you subscribe for more draft content. Like we said at the beginning, we are on the road to 1K. We need 1K before the draft. If we get DraftKings on this pod, then we can really start elevating ourselves there in the production value. Because at the moment, it's me, you, and Paddy, and we want to expand. We want to get this British Brother draft content really rolling out to you guys. So again, make sure you subscribe if you liked the video. Make sure you leave a like. If you disagree or agree with any of our takes, make sure you leave a comment. Flame New in the comments if you need be. Flame me. You know what? Before I go, New, you know what I'm seeing now as a take?
What?
Luther Burden to the 49ers at 11. Never wrong, just early. I did mock that in one of my first mock drafts before Deebo Samuel got traded, and I got flamed for it. But look, it all comes back round, doesn't it, New?
It all comes back round. Will Johnson to the Dolphins loading. That's all I need.
Okay, well, I've been your host, Dom Corbs. That's been my co-host, Nick Corbs. We've been Corbs NFL. We'll see you on the next one.
See ya.